the pessimistic, optimistic, and everyone in between. My name is Connor Philippine. Welcome back to the Minnesotan Sports Podcast, and we are finally there, the most important part of the NFL season before the playoffs. That is, of course, the week before the playoffs, where there's going to be 3 divisions decided in this last week, 2 of them on Saturday and 1 of them on Sunday Night Football. And of course, we have random seeding things that can happen throughout the course of the week as well. Starting off here with the Panthers and Buccaneers and Seahawks and 49ers. Panthers and the Buccaneers, after all the rigmarole of the last 2 weeks, the Buccaneers have a pretty low chance actually of winning the NFC South, because not only do they need to win, they also would need the Saints to beat the Falcons. So taking a look here at the way we've been talking about this weird scenario where it's possible that there could be a 3-way tie and the Panthers could still win with a Buccaneers win in this game. And it actually ended up potentially being the case, because the Falcons are currently 7-9, New Orleans Saints sitting at 6-10. This is no gimme of a matchup for the Atlanta Falcons, but if the Atlanta Falcons win, then it wouldn't matter. Even if the Panthers lose that game, potentially there could be a 8-9 champion of the NFC South, even if the Buccaneers win that game. So it would be a 3-way tie, and it would come down to the best winning percentage of those 3 teams playing the other 2 teams in that group of 3. In that case, I can't remember the exact. I think it's the Falcons would be 1-3 or 1-4, and then no, it would be 4 total games. So 1-3 would be for the Falcons. The Buccaneers would be 2-2. 3-1 would be the Panthers in those common games between those 3 teams. And so the Panthers would win that tiebreaker. So it's looking pretty good for the Panthers, because even with the Falcons and the Saints being pretty close in terms of win percentage, I give a pretty good edge to that game between the Falcons and the Saints to the Falcons. So I think there's a pretty good chance that the Buccaneers and the Panthers might not be battling for the division in that one game, because I think the Panthers are going to get it either way. I think in this situation, though, gosh, it's a battle of momentum, because the Buccaneers, I still believe, are the team with the most potential, and they're the team that I think has the best chance of pulling off that upset in that wild card round, which is always weird saying that a team that won their division is going to be trying to pull an upset off in the next week, but that is the case here. I do think the Buccaneers will win this game. It's tough because they have been sliding the last few weeks, and the Panthers have been playing better football, but the Panthers kind of getting kicked to the ground by the Seahawks last week. On top of that, Buccaneers being at home. The Buccaneers, I feel like, have a good chance of kind of pulling it together, rallying together, and winning this game once it really matters, because I just feel like Baker Mayfield shouldn't be denied or shouldn't be overlooked in these kinds of matchups when it really is on the line. The Bucs have had more experience just as a team in general in these types of must-win situations, and I just feel like they're going to find a way to put something together. Obviously, it's one of those toss-up matchups where you feel like the last 3 or 4 weeks, the Panthers have been playing better football. The entire season as a whole, I feel like I would go with the Buccaneers in that department. It's just been such a night and day difference between the Bucs we saw at the beginning of the season and the current Bucs. But I just feel like at any given time, the Bucs can explode for a really good game. And I just feel like if there's any game to feel that they're going to do that, it's got to be this one. So I do think the Buccaneers will win. However, I guess I'll skip ahead here, since it matters within the division, to the game between the Falcons and the Saints, which is a noon game on Sunday. I do think the Falcons are going to get this win. They're minus 3.5 favorites. I think they're going to cover that. I just feel like even though it's a 7-9 versus 6-10 difference, I do think that the Falcons are a better team. And regardless of who we're watching at quarterback, I don't know. I would expect it to be Kirk Cousins, but we'll have to see here in that last game of the season with it not really mattering that much. But I do think the Falcons will have that edge, and they will find a way to get the Carolina Panthers to the playoffs and with this NFC South championship, no matter what happens in that game. But obviously, that first game will be Saturday evening, so we'll have to see what's going to happen if the Buccaneers win that game. If the Panthers win, though, we'll know already. 49ers and Seahawks, not only are they battling to win the NFC West this week, as the Rams are officially out of the race, I think even before they played their last game, but especially losing that one 11-5, obviously have no chance for the West. So it's between these two teams, but also taking a look at the playoff picture, there's no other team that can reach either of these two for the number one seed either. And so the winner of this game will have the potential for the playoffs to run through their stadium, which is interesting because the 49ers stadium is going to be hosting the Super Bowl. So it could be another one of those situations, if they make it that far, for them to host the Super Bowl in their own stadium. But that is a long way off because we're still talking about whether or not they'll even get a home game in this entire playoff run, because it's going to be at Levi Stadium, a huge benefit for the 49ers, but important to note that the Seahawks are 7-1 in away games so far this season. And so that they are no slouch on the road. Even if they were to lose this game, they would definitely be a formidable opponent on the road in the playoffs. Sam Darnold and the Seahawks coming off of a huge emotional win against the Panthers, especially an emotional win for Sam Darnold playing against his former opponent. Seahawks are minus 1.5 favorites in this game, and it's going to really come down to momentum, just like we talked about in previous games. Seahawks are going to be just as difficult of an offense as the Bears were last week, and so we'll have to see if this is another shootout in this game. Seahawks defense has kind of been keeping them in games for a few of the different games in high leverage situations this year. Sam Darnold was able to mount that comeback against the Rams a few weeks back because of the defense and the way they've been able to play. If we see the 49ers offense like they played against the Bears, it's going to be really tough for the Seahawks defense to really carry things, and Sam Darnold's going to have to play a really good brand of football if they're going to win this game. It was a huge emotional win for them against the Bears. They're carrying so much momentum into this game. Both teams are. I just feel like the 49ers have just had a pedigree and a history of success in games like this, where the last few years, I mean, last year was pretty difficult for them, but before that, in the last few years, they've had playoff and Super Bowl aspirations. This is a game where, this coaching staff and the veterans on this offense and defense have been in these types of situations before. Sam Darnold was in this exact same situation last year, and he was not able to get the job done against a very good Lions team. So we're going to have to see how he plays in this one. But we talk about how Purdy and this 49ers offense had to almost play perfect football last week. And if we see that from them again, I just don't think the Seahawks offense can catch up, especially with the history Darnold has had of being good for a good amount of interceptions in high leverage games in the past. And I don't think the 49ers would potentially allow a comeback like the Rams did a couple weeks ago. So I'm going to have to go with the 49ers to win this game, to win the division, and get the number one seed just because of the momentum, the way the season's gone for both of these two teams. And Seahawks understand how big of a game this is, and we're just going to have to see what Sam Darnold's made of in these situations. If Sam Darnold can go into Levi's Stadium and get this victory in a convincing fashion and show the world that this team, the Seahawks team, deserves to be a one seed, I certainly think that they can go to the Super Bowl. But if they lose this game, then I'm going to have really big doubts about them even being an NFC championship team, because you got to win the big games. And that's the whole reason why the Vikings moved on from Sam Darnold. And if he can prove the Vikings wrong, I certainly will be a sad Vikings fan. But I'm also rooting for the guy because he's been through a lot and he deserves to really prove himself in the last part of the season. But I do predict the 49ers to win this game and win the NFC West. We have a lot of games here that don't really matter, and so I'm not really going to go through them very much. Packers-Vikings literally does not matter for anything but next year's draft pick. I'm going to go with the Vikings in this one because the Packers are going to be resting their starters. They have no reason to do that, whereas the Vikings want a feel-good win to end their season. If McCarthy can play, he's going to, because we want to see how he can do in this last game of the season against the Packers and see how his arm is. And there's going to be a lot of questions going into the offseason. We want to have our starters out there just to see what we're made of one more time. So I do think the Vikings will get that victory. I already talked about Saints-Falcons, Browns-Bengals. I'm predicting the Bengals to win this one. I think that that Joe Burrow in this offense is going to want to go off for one more game. Who knows if Joe Burrow is going to be with the Bengals next season? I certainly think he will be. I think the trade rumors are kind of overblown right now. We're going to have to see how that works out. And obviously with the ties to the Vikings in the offseason, I'm going to have to talk about that as it progresses. I don't see Joe Burrow going anywhere. And not to mention the fact he still has a no trade clause and all that stuff. So I do think the Bengals will get this victory as they go into what could potentially be a tumultuous offseason. Cowboys and Giants, I'll just say that the Cowboys win this one. Could be a toss-up. Jags and Titans is now the next game that matters for the sake of the playoff picture. Because taking a look here at the AFC South, the Jacksonville Jaguars and Houston Texans both still have a chance to win this AFC South. The Jaguars would need to lose, and the Houston Texans would need to win their game against the Indianapolis Colts, which is the next one on our schedule, which is convenient, in order for the Texans to win the AFC South. Now, you'd think that this game against the Titans would be just an absolute no-doubter. In fact, the Jacksonville Jaguars are minus 13.5 favorites to win this game, but you just never know in the AFC South. Not to rag on too many people in the AFC South as fans, but how many times have we seen an AFC South team and all they need to do is win against the worst team in that division or another division to win the division, and they somehow find a way to lose it? I know that in the past, the Texans have given it up a few times. The Jaguars and the Colts have both given it up a couple times. The Colts have given it up multiple seasons, and so you never really quite know. I think the Titans, with their defense, will put up a fight and make it a close game in the sense of points, but it'll just be one of those low-scoring affairs. I feel like the Jags will dominate the game all game long. It just won't be as shocking of a final score because the Titans will at least keep the scoring to a minimum, but they will also keep the score to a minimum on their side of the ball offensively, which is why I think the Jags will win this game. But again, crazier things have happened within the AFC South. Before we talk about the Texans and the Colts, I'm going to talk about the AFC wildcard race right now because there's going to be multiple games coming up here that are going to all refer to that, because obviously the Texans want to win to try and win the AFC South, but on top of that, they are currently sitting at 11-5, tied with the Chargers and the Bills, and they have the tiebreaker over both those teams, so they are the 5 seed currently. So not only do they want to win this game to be the potentially number 1 team in the AFC South, they also want to hang on to that number 5 seed. It's going to be very interesting to see how these teams look at it, but we kind of know the majority of them. The Chargers have come out and said they are not going to be starting Herbert in that game. So clearly the Chargers are fine with any of those 3 teams, and the last thing they want to do is hurt Justin Herbert in the last game of the season. And I thought the Bills were going to do the same thing, but based off of the things I've been looking up, it looks like he is expected to start in Week 18, which I am very surprised by. Josh Allen already dealing with kind of an ankle situation, and so even if he wasn't hurt, I would expect the Bills to rest their starters, but it looks like they are not going to, against a Jets team that I legitimately think they could rest their starters and still beat. So it's crazy to me. I understand the importance of, you don't want to rest your starters because you want to stay fresh for the next week and all that stuff. The second, maybe even first best quarterback in the league is dealing with an ankle injury where you are going up against potentially the Broncos, Patriots, Jags, or Steelers. No matter who you're playing in the first round, you have a chance against if you're the Bills. And I just don't understand why. Even the difference between the Jags and the Steelers I know is important. I don't think it's more important than making sure Allen doesn't re-injure that ankle, because this genuinely has the potential to be a Super Bowl season still for the Bills. I mean, we're looking at a AFC playoff picture where the 7th seed is currently 2 games less than the number 1 seed. This is an incredibly top-heavy and incredibly even, wild card and playoff race. It's crazy on both sides. Even in the NFC, the 9-6 team is the 7th seed due to some injuries. I mean, for the most part, these are teams where you genuinely think any team has a chance. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if more than half of each round were upsets, and we potentially might not even see the 1 and 2 seeds in potentially the AFC or the NFC in the championship game or the Super Bowl. So going back to my original point, why would the Bills start Josh Allen? I truly don't understand. I think you could play a few. Honestly, if you play your defensive starters and have backups in on offense, I still think that you would find a way to beat the New York Jets this season. I mean, they're currently, I have to scroll even further down here. They're currently 3-13, have been eliminated from the playoffs for the longest time here, and they are 0-5 within the division, 2-9 within the conference. Rest your starters and you'll still beat the Jets. I don't understand why they would play Josh Allen in this game, but they do have a chance to leapfrog the Chargers. It is a sizable difference between playing the Jags or playing the Patriots or Broncos. You know, that you feel a little bit more confident playing the Jags in that situation. Also, you do still have a chance to be able to play the Steelers or Ravens, which is another huge difference, especially with Lamar Jackson's potential injuries and the way the Steelers offense has kind of been stalling lately. I mean, they just lost to the Browns. So it kind of all amalgamates in these decisions, and it's really difficult. Also, the Texans kind of get screwed over here because the Chargers and the Bills both play at 325. And so both of those two teams get to know before their games start whether or not the 5 seed is even a possibility, whereas the Texans have to play their starters no matter what, but they were going to anyway because they had a chance at the AFC South. So I guess it all pans out fine. But that's kind of the situation going into this game. And so we'll move things back here to the Colts and the Texans, where the Colts don't have a chance at the playoffs. Obviously, they're still trying to play spoiler to the Houston Texans and move them and get them down a peg. I do expect the Houston Texans to win this game, especially with the fact that they won't know until the end of the game whether or not they had a chance at the South. It would be much different if the Jags played first and then they found out they weren't winning the division, and then they maybe would, tone it down a little bit. But again, 5 seed still is important versus these other 2 seeds, and you have a chance in this kind of a crazy situation in the AFC. I wouldn't be surprised if the 5 seed had a chance at least of hosting a playoff game at some point by the end. Not saying for sure, but it's a crazy situation here in the playoffs this year. But I do think the Texans will win. They'll secure the 5 seed, and we'll have to see here. I expect the Jags to win, and they won't have a chance at the AFC South. But again, crazier things have happened. Now moving on here, we do have the Bills and Jets. Now we'll have to see here if maybe the Bills will rethink their decision if the 5 seed is no longer up for grabs by the time they play. They do play at 325. I feel like I'm going to go with the Bills either way here. I truly think the Jets are so bad that the Bills will still win, even if they play half the game with their starters, even if they completely take the game off. I'm just going to go with the Bills no matter what happens here. They would potentially leapfrog the Chargers, but we're going to have to see there. We'll get to them in just a second. The Lions and the Bears. Now, this is still an important game for the Bears because we are talking about potentially a home field advantage between them and the Eagles. You take a look here, 11-5 for both of these two teams. The Bears currently sitting at the number 2 seed, and that's because they have the head-to-head win percentage over the Eagles. We're going to skip again here to the Eagles and the Commanders because I'm going to say outright Eagles are going to win this game. I expect them to play their starters for the first half because we're talking about the difference between playing at Soldier Field and Lincoln Financial Field, which are 2 huge potential home field advantages for both of these 2 teams. Soldier Field, always a difficult place to play, loud, passionate fans. Eagles, not only is it loud and passionate, but you don't know if you're going to get a crowbar thrown at you from the second deck because these Eagles fans are absolutely insane and hostile in a bad way, not just in a fan way. And so you never want to have to play at Lincoln Financial Field. You don't know what's going to happen to you there. So the Bears are going to be trying in this game against the Lions, but how hard are they going to be trying? It kind of remains to be seen. I still think they should be trying the majority of this game for that reason. Home field advantage huge in that divisional round. I'm going to say the Lions win this game, though. I think that Dan Campbell is going to be treating this like a playoff game, and the Lions are going to have absolutely nothing to lose. It's going to be one of those situations where the Lions are going to be going for it for the majority of the game, in my opinion, and it just kind of comes down to whether or not that roll of the dice ends up paying off or not for them. I expect it to, and I think the Lions will get this victory, which in that case, if I'm saying the Eagles will beat the Commanders, would get the Eagles in the second spot and would give them potentially home field advantage in that divisional round. That is, of course, if the Eagles and Bears even both win in the wild card round, because Packers might be beatable with their injuries and the kind of things they've gone through the last couple weeks. The Rams are still a very formidable opponent, sitting at 11-5. I mean, they are the same record as both of these two teams, so you never know what's going to happen. But again, home field advantage huge at that stage. Next up, we have the Chargers and the Broncos. This is pretty much a no-brainer here. The Broncos should win this game, as we already talked about. Herbert not going to be playing in this game, as the Chargers seem to be okay with potentially getting the number 7 seed and playing the Patriots rather than playing the Jags if they were the 6 seed, or even the Steelers. So they seem to have already made their peace with that, and I respect that. You know, you don't want to risk that kind of an injury with Herbert, who has already gone through so much behind this Chargers offensive line this year. So the Broncos just need to win this game, basically. They're tied with the New England Patriots at 13-3 on top of the AFC Conference. They get the number 1 seed if they win this game. And of course, the Patriots are going to be playing the Dolphins. Should be an easy win for them. So it is very important for them to still win this one, but I very much expect them to, and they'll get the number 1 seed, and the AFC playoffs will potentially run through Mile High, which is a dangerous thought, because this is a very good fan base and the stadium is very tough to play in. So we'll have to see what happens there. Chiefs, Raiders, doesn't matter. I'll go with the Chiefs for just the fun of it. Next up, the Rams and the Cardinals. Now this one does matter, because we take a look now back at the NFC Conference, and the 49ers and the Rams are currently both sitting at 5 and then at 6 in the wild card round. Now, of course, the 49ers can beat the Seahawks and win that number 1 seed, and then because the Seahawks and the Rams are 2 games apart, the Rams would easily just take that 5 spot, and no matter what happens in this game with the Rams, you know, it wouldn't matter. So obviously, if the 49ers win on Saturday night, then the Rams will rest their starters and be content with the number 6 seed. Packers 9-6-1, they can't take the number 6 seed either. So we'll have to see here. Assuming the Rams play and are trying to win, I think the Rams will win this game, but they still do have a reason to try and win, because if the 49ers lose and fall to 12-5 and the Rams beat the Cardinals, the Rams have the tiebreaker over the 49ers, and they would get to move to the 5 seed. And you talk about the difference between the Jags and the Steelers or Ravens. That's a pretty big difference, but I feel like this is a much bigger difference. The difference between playing either the Bears and Eagles at the 6 seed, or getting to play either the Panthers or the Bucks in a situation where that division has been completely up for grabs based off of how rough it's been for both of these two teams. So I think this is a pretty big difference in terms of the team you have to play in the first week. I do think that the Rams will win that game against the Cardinals if it ends up being important, and they will get the number 5 seed over the Niners if they were to lose to the Seahawks. The last game that matters on Sunday Night Football, Ravens-Steelers, Ravens at 8-8, Steelers at 9-7, and it's people have been talking about the Ravens' desire to throw away their season with injuries versus the Steelers' like natural need to get a 9-8 record, because that just feels like it's been the case for the Steelers for as long as I can remember. Mike Tomlin just seems to lead his team to mid performances every single year, and it sucks because Mike Tomlin has been known, to me anyway, as one of the best coaches of all time, and these last few years he's kind of been faltering in getting good, talented teams past that threshold. Even now with Aaron Rodgers, who's supposed to be a much better quarterback than the quarterbacks the Steelers have had in previous years, they still are right back at this point. But they have a chance to become 10-7, which is quite the difference between that and 9-8, and they can do it at home against these Ravens. However, the Ravens are minus 3.5 right now, assuming Lamar Jackson plays. This Ravens team has gone through so much, and at one point it looked like they didn't have much of a chance. They were sitting at, I believe it was 1-5 at one point in the season back when Lamar Jackson was hurt. He came back from injury, and even with him continuing to be hurt and dealing with that injury bug, they've been able to turn to Huntley and still get wins. And so it's crazy that the Ravens found a way to get a win last week against the Packers. Obviously, the Packers also didn't have their quarterback in, but they were able to get that victory, whereas the Steelers, with their starting quarterback in, lost to the Browns. The momentum is definitely in the Ravens' favor now that Lamar Jackson is going to be back in this game, and I do expect the Ravens to win this one. Obviously, the Steelers having the home field advantage is a big factor, but the Ravens are 5-2 in away games this season. Again, Lamar Jackson's back. I feel like Derrick Henry can run all over, and just the way he changes the pace of the game, the way he forces other teams to play the way this Ravens team wants to play is huge. And again, Aaron Rodgers in this offense is just off right now, and they have this pretty much practice window to figure it out before they potentially have their season end in this primetime situation. So I just don't have much confidence in the Steelers right now. I don't have confidence in either of these two teams once the playoff hits, but I do think the Ravens will get this victory, win the AFC North, and find a way there. There it is, everything all wrapped up and tidy, and the next time we talk about the NFL here, it is going to be the playoffs, and it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm working on potentially having a live stream for one of these playoff games, so I'll keep you updated on that, so make sure you look on social media. And by the way, if you're not following me on social media, make sure you do follow me. If you don't really care much about the YouTube notifications or feel like you don't follow them very well, it's a lot easier to get notifications on when I post on social media, because every time a video comes out, I make a post about it being out. So if you want to stay updated, if you want things on my social media stories and everything I talk about there, make sure you follow me on social media. Again, just at the Minnesotan Sports Podcast. But thanks so much for watching this one. Please like and subscribe. We'll see you in the playoffs, and I'll see you on the flip side.